Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Matt Doolittle, the Global Portfolio Manager for Document Scanners at Kodak Alaris. Matt, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
And I think just a good place to start here is just recognizing that the federal agency's Digital Guidelines Initiative, or FADGI, has evolved considerably over the years. And so just give me a better understanding of how that evolution has happened and what has changed the most from your perspective since the standards were first created.
Let me introduce a little bit of what FADGI is before we get into that question. So FADGI is a mandate for how images should be created to meet a standard that was initiated by M1921, forcing all government agencies to digitize and move away from physical document storage. So FADGI is a guideline for how paper documents should be turned into electronic images. Now, the original guideline that's in effect now is known colloquially as the FADGI 2016 standard. We are looking at a revision that's supposed to come this year, so we're calling it FADGI 2022. In this FADGI 2022 update, what we hear is going to be in there is a few things, not a huge difference, but we're going to be adding a new, it's called a document classification called unbound documents, modern textual records, which is really focused at the kinds of documents we see in business. So the traditional FADGI guideline had all sorts of things for historically significant documents, which were being applied to paper that was printed on laser printers, right? So it wasn't really a great match. So in FADGI 2022, they're adding this modern textual records, which will help us as vendors create better products that can be used in the market, and will help people that are scanning large volumes of paper to be able to do that in a way that's appropriate for those kind of documents. There's a few other cleanup things that are happening with the spec. They're changing some technical details, something called spatial frequency response. They're changing how that's measured. They're changing the tools that they're using for measuring it from something called CRGB to lab, which is a measuring, essentially think of it as a ruler for how they measure. Lab gives us a much more consistent way of measuring the detailed aspects of the document. And also for these modern textual records, they are not looking to measure the color densities as they were for the other documents that were historically significant. So for example, you can't print blacks as black as they were measuring on laser printers, so there's no need to force all of the machines and the processes to measure those very dark blacks. And then there's just cleanup for adding glossary and just making it a more usable document. So none of the things are final as far as we're talking today. It could be ratified tomorrow, but nothing is final in the FADGI 2022 standard. But that's what we're hearing from the agencies that are developing this standard and the industry experts that they are contracting to help them with this.
Okay, great. And just to pull on that thread a little bit more, what considerations do agencies need to make to ensure that these digitized records are as true to their hard copy originals as possible?
Well, that's really the whole focus of the FADGI guideline. I don't want to call it a standard because it is a guideline, is to create a way that we can measure the images that are coming into permanent storage so that they can be all consistent and be the best quality as possible. So the guideline has very detailed specifications about 5 or 6 different categories of imaging aspects, resolution, file type, spatial frequency response, the color density, the color acuity, all of those things are well defined, so that it doesn't matter whether the images came from a device from manufacturer A, B, or C, or from agency X, Y, or Z, that all of those coming into the to the archive and the storage will be of a consistently good quality, so that if we want to look at them again in 50 years or 100 years, we'll have a good basis to start from.
Okay, great. A lot of considerations there. I'm really kind of struck by that. And since we've been talking about M1921, it seems like this is obviously a huge goal for agencies to meet. This is a big year-end thing for permanent records to be in this electronic format. I imagine that really ups the demand for these kinds of scanners, for these kinds of services. And so I'm just kind of curious, how can vendors and industry help agencies meet this demand? Because the end of 2022, it's happening sooner rather than later.
It absolutely is. And it's really forcing this move to a more mature document imaging environment for all of the federal records. What we can do as vendors, right, first of all, is give you machines that can meet these standards, right? So my company, Kodak Alaris, has been producing document imaging scanners since 1990, right? So we have 3 decades of experience creating images that will work in a business workflow. What we need to do for the industry now is to create slightly different looking images than people had been expecting for the last 30 years to meet these FADGI guideline standards. So we're creating equipment. There are other vendors in the market that are creating equipment. That's the best thing that we can do, is be sure that that equipment is available for you to purchase in time to meet your deadlines, that they're easy to use, that they work and create FADGI images out of the box without having a huge setup process, right? So it's important that in order for the industry and the agencies to meet these guidelines, that they have something easy to use, that doesn't require a lot of setup, and that'll stay in compliance for a long time, right? So some of the challenges we've seen earlier is that the devices, they have thermal drift or other technical reasons why they need to be recalibrated or reconfigured after so long in service. We need to create devices that will allow your agency just to do your scanning and not have to worry about the technology that's behind it. From ourselves and other resellers and vendors and ISVs in the industry, then I think it's education, right? How do you do this? What does it really mean to do this? What are the challenges that your agency is going to have when dealing with these files? So I think the rest of the equation is an educational one.
Okay, great. I want to hear more about the recalibration and the I guess the maintenance of this hardware over time, just making sure that a consistent quality of image is ensured for really the life cycle of that equipment.
Sure. So in order to meet the compliance, there is a well-defined method for ensuring that's included in the FADGI guideline. And it starts with these targets, right? There is a specific target that is, the quality is known. So you scan the target at least daily, and then you take the images that are candidates for being FADGI compliant, and you run them through a testing software. The most popular version of that is called Golden Thread. There is other options that are available in the market, but Golden Thread is the current standard. And what that software will do is it will evaluate every aspect of the components of that target and make sure that they meet the criteria that is defined in the FADGI guideline. If all of it's good, it gives you a check mark, a green check mark that says, hey, you're good, go ahead and continue scanning for the day. Or it'll tell you, what aspect of the target is not being met. And then you can either clean the scanner, which is usually the problem, or make other changes that you would need to get those images back in compliant and repeat the process. So the guidelines suggest that you do this at least daily. In the morning usually would be the ideal time to do that, and then scan through the day. I know some customers are doing a 2 or 3 times per day check to make sure that their devices are FADGI compliant. You can't take a normal business document and say, this is a FADGI compliant image, because there isn't a known set of criteria on that document that we can test. So you have to test with a known target, scan, and then test again to be sure that you're still in compliance.
Okay, great. And I think just a natural follow-on to this is just recognizing that under FADGI, there is a star quality ranking of how good and high fidelity the image is here. So, just walk me through a little bit more of that in greater detail of how organizations actually make the determination of what star quality any given image is clocking in at.
Sure, absolutely. So the FADGI guideline has a 4-star rating system, 1 being the lowest and 4 being the highest, where 4-star is meant for the most important historically significant documents. It's not something that would be used for modern textual records, right? Something that was printed on a laser printer. You wouldn't need to meet a 4-star quality standard for that, just because there isn't enough content on there to need that level of scrutiny and resolution and quality. So the industry has standardized for modern textual records on the 3-star requirement. It requires that it be a color image, and it needs to be in one of 3 particular color spaces. We know that the images that come off of that are going to be what we're going to need to do really good OCR extraction for optical character recognition, so that if we want to mine all of these documents for real meaning and data in the future, that's what we're going to need. Level 2 and level 1 are less stringent versions of the standard. Level 2, you can start to get grayscale or bitonal images. Level 1 really it exists, but I haven't seen it specified as a valid requirement for any in any industry RFQs or requests for levels of scanning at the 1-star. So we're really focusing on that 3-star, either 300 DPI or 400 DPI standard. There are other international standards that all seem to be 4 levels as well. There's an ISO 19264 standard, which has 4 levels. And there's a standard that was popular in Europe called Metamorphos, which also had 4 levels of quality. So it's very consistent with the trends that have been going on in the world, that the FADGI guideline have a 4-level system.
Okay, great. Well, we'll get back to that in just a minute here. My guest today is Matt Doolittle, the Global Portfolio Manager for Document Scanners at Kodak Alaris. I'm your moderator, Jory Heckman, on the special bulletin review, Pathway to FADGI Compliance, sponsored by Kodak Alaris on Federal News Network.